Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Victoria Nguyen. I'm from the University of Virginia Club of DC, and it is a huge honor to welcome you all to this wonderful presentation. I unfortunately did not have the pleasure of putting this event on, but want to thank our school's chair, Robin Tiberia, who you've probably seen her name, for putting this on. She unfortunately is not able to make it today. But nonetheless, I would like to introduce you to our speaker, Ann Dolin here. I believe, Ann, this is not the first time you've worked with us, so
I've
want
been
to
here
thank
many
you.
times.
Yes, want to
Sure.
thank you for your continued partnership with the Club of DC. So a little bit about Ann. Ann has a strong conviction that school doesn't have to place stress on children and parents. Based on her nearly 30 years of experience working with students, she has developed practical strategies that she shares to help kids succeed and make the most of their academic journey, including college admissions, which we all know, very scary. So, Ann, absolutely grateful for your expertise and wisdom. Ann is a former public school teacher and author who founded Educational Connections in 1998. Her team provides tutoring, executive function coaching, test prep, and college admissions counseling in the Washington, D.C. area and beyond. Educational Connections specializes in helping students craft a narrative and a strong high school resume, which enables them to stand out in a very competitive college admissions environment. So without further ado, Ann, welcome. I will pass it to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Victoria. It's great to be here this evening. Tonight, we're talking about the roadmap to college, 6 ways to help kids plan ahead and get into the college of their dreams. But before we start, I'd love for Victoria to talk a little bit about a program that is unique to parents with children at UVA or parents that went to UVA, their kids are applying. And so, Victoria, before we get going, can you talk a little bit about the College Compass program?
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. I think we can go to the next slide. I can talk a little bit about College Compass. Now, I will be honest, everybody, I just learned about this program a few days ago. I'm reading from the website. I promise I'm not super well knowledgeable. I'm not an expert, so don't be impressed. But like Ann mentioned, this is a program that the Alumni Association has created to support children of alums as they embark on their, junior and senior years, and they're looking into programs. This is a part of the Alumni Association's admission liaison program. So this is, again, for UVA alumni families with students who are pursuing the college application or transfer process. Through College Compass, they do provide all of these resources you see in front of here, which I think are absolutely valuable. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more, I recommend signing up, or you can even go onto the website because I do have the site up right now, and they expand a little bit more about the various resources provided, but a great resource. Glad Melissa and Ann's team actually told me about this, so now I can make sure we spread the word. But yes, for any parents who are interested, we do want to make you aware of this great program.
Thank you
All right,
so much,
okay, back to you,
Victoria.
Ann.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And it is such a great program, and it is unique to UVA. So I encourage you, if you have kids that are applying to college, even if they don't apply to UVA, they will help you at UVA, and they will help your child understand the whole process. They'll help them differentiate themselves with their essays, all of those things. So I highly recommend it. And as Victoria said, you can go online, sign up, and then that will put you in touch with one of the representatives there. All right, so let's get started. Tonight, we're talking about the changing landscape of college admissions. And it is such an interesting time. Before COVID, there was this big movement towards colleges that said, actually, you don't have to submit the SAT or ACT anymore. And when colleges did this, it opened up this whole new way of thinking about admissions. Now, COVID accelerated that because during COVID, kids couldn't go and sit for an SAT or ACT. So suddenly colleges had data of GPAs on students, but they didn't have test scores. So that forced them into the direction even more. So now most colleges across the country are test optional, which means that if kids want to submit an SAT or ACT score, they can, but they're not required and it's not held against them. We'll talk more about this movement in just a moment. But that's what's changed a lot when we think of college admissions, because it used to be, if you fit into this box where you had this GPA and these test scores, you apply to these types of schools. But now so many kids have said, oh, in the past, I may not have gotten into this school, but now my grades are good. My test scores weren't that great. So I may not have applied there in the past, but now I am. So for that reason, kids are applying to more schools than ever before. And also when admissions representatives look at kids' applications, they can't just favor the grades and test scores. They have to look at other factors. And there are many factors that we're going to talk about tonight, like essays, what you do over the summer, how you differentiate yourself and your skill set. And so it used to be kind of cut and dry, which type of student would get into which type of school. But now it's definitely more gray, and it's very much less predictable than it was 5 or 10 years ago when it comes to acceptances. So what are we seeing? Well, the Common App is reporting that applications to highly selective college, which UVA is a highly selective college, are up by 25% in 2 years. And again, it's because of this test optional movement. Kids are applying to schools they may not have applied to in the past. And it's not just limited to really selective schools, but we're also seeing that even moderately selective schools like JMU, for example, are also seeing an increase. We're not seeing as much of an increase in less selective schools, but it seems that the schools that are that take very few applicants, they're the ones that are seeing the most boon in this test optional environment. So let's look at some of the statistics. And now this is class of 2026. So these are current college freshmen. Look at the Virginia Tech numbers, 45,000 applicants for only about 7,000 slots. Now, that doesn't mean that only 7,000 kids are going to get accepted. Certainly, there will be more students because not everybody is going to choose to go to Virginia Tech. But it shows you that it's a little bit out of whack right now, that they have far more applicants than they do slots. Same with UVA, 50,000 applicants for about 4,000 slots. So we can see that college is really competitive in this environment. So what I want to talk to you tonight is about how you can help your kids get ahead and certain things your kids can do now to prepare for college entrance in the future. Every day our parents call our office looking for help for their kids. And we're in this unique position to talk to lots of parents to help their kids with their applications and to see the outcomes. So over time, we've seen that there are certain things that kids can do that really make a difference. So let's start out with academic planning. This is basically a fancy word for course selection. Colleges, especially the highly selective ones, want to see, have you challenged yourself when necessary? For example, if your school offers lots of AP classes, are you taking those challenging classes, especially in the ones that you may want to major? So for example, if you want to apply to the School of Engineering, or you want to be an engineering major, are you taking the most advanced math and science classes? So colleges are looking to see, have you challenged yourself adequately? How many AP, IB, or dual enrollment courses has your student taken? It depends on your school, what they offer. So colleges are looking for grades. That is the number one factor, grades and academic rigor. Also progression. Even if maybe you started out shaky in 9th grade, has there been a progression so that your grades are getting better as you go along and you're taking more challenging classes? And then again, are you picking those classes that are related to what you might study in college? And it's okay if you don't know. A lot of kids don't. But are you basically challenging yourself to your fullest capacity? For that reason, we often see, sometimes kids come to us when they're juniors and we look back and they might want to apply to engineering and we see that they didn't take the right math classes early on when they're in 7th and 8th grade. So for that reason, we start working with kids when they're young. It's not too early, just to help with course selection, to make sure that the classes they're picking are putting them in that right trajectory if they're capable. So certainly rigor is a factor. Now, rigor is a factor, and so are grades for these highly selective schools. But if you're applying to maybe a mid-range school, it doesn't mean that you have to take so many AP classes. It might mean that you have a more normal load. So really, your rigor is going to depend on where you want to attend. So we know that grades are the #1 factor for college admission, hands down, grades. But let's think about other factors like this gray area that I mentioned. One is a theme throughout high school, and a theme is kind of like how you stand out, how you brand yourself, your resume that you've compiled over time. In a sense, your narrative. I can think back to when my youngest son was applying to college. He's 20 now, and he goes to JMU. And he loved video production, and he had just a kind of a knack for it. And he would film his friends that were in hip hop, bands, or his friends that were rappers. He'd go to their concerts and he'd film videos for them. And then you would use it in their promotional material. And he got really good at this over time, and he really loved doing it. And he thought, you know what, I might want to major in this in college. So to help him create his narrative or his theme, he also applied for a business license through Fairfax County. It's $25, and he created his own company, Dolin Productions. Then he took a class at George Mason on video production over the summer. So that's an example of kind of creating your theme, what's unique about you. We have this student in our program, and now he's a junior. He started with us when he's a sophomore. And this kid comes to us and he's like, you know what? I don't think I can stand out. I'm just an average kid. There's nothing unique about me. And we have this assessment that we give to kids when they first come into our program, and it identifies their unique gifts. Like, what are they naturally good at? And could those be applied to a major? And this is really helpful when kids say, I'm not good at anything, I don't know what I want to do, because it kind of teases out their uniquenesses, and it actually makes them feel good about themselves. But anyways, so we start talking to the student, his college advisor, Lisa, and it turns out that he actually has this unbelievably unique gift. He's an amazing fly fisherman. And in fact, he had won a lot of local tournaments. And not only that, he created this fly that he made himself. And when he went to these tournaments, he would sell it out of the back of his mom's minivan. And he loved doing it. And although he knew he couldn't major in that at college, he thought, you know what, maybe I could
Ted, I need
major
you to head out, please.
entrepreneurship, or I could do something
Because I
in the
want you to
field
be
of
early,
business.
and if you have to go to the potty and
Don't say
Hi,
pot.
I'm sorry. If you're talking, can you mute yourself? Thank you. And so he set up a site on Etsy and he started selling his flies. He created a website for his product, and that was his theme. So now he's like invested a lot of time in this. But your theme doesn't have to be something so unique. It could be that maybe you played soccer for 4 years in high school and you love soccer, and maybe at the end you were the captain of your team. Or perhaps you started a program to earn money for kids that are underprivileged, to buy them cleats for soccer. Those are examples of themes. But what I will say is that when it comes to college admissions, it's really different than when we were kids. We kind of just rolled up with our grades and our test scores and applied. But now things are different, even just from 5 years ago. It's super strategic now. You really have to think ahead, especially if you're applying to a really competitive school. It can't just be that you think of these things at the last minute. It really is a thoughtful process. Also, thinking about these things earlier really helps to reduce stress. It doesn't, I don't believe, put more stress on kids when you have a plan of what you're going to do, when you've gotten outside help, those are things that make you sleep easier at night. Now, you'll also need to be strategic about the SAT or the ACT, because as I mentioned, most schools across the country are now test optional. That may change. We know that we've seen this change already in Florida and the Georgia system, the state systems, where now they say, actually, everybody applying to a state school has to submit a test score. But right now, that's not the case in Virginia. Schools often report that they're gathering information. What are kids' grades like that didn't submit a score when they get to college? Are they graduating within 4 years? So they're collecting that information, and they say then they'll decide what they're going to do about the program. But right now, the current reality is that schools are test optional. So if your child does decide to take an SAT or ACT, that could really help their application. It's one more data point for the school. Schools, however, when they see your scores, they shouldn't say, oh, I'm going to hold this against the student, or I'm going to, make a decision solely based on SAT or ACT scores. That can't be the case. Scores, so for example, let me back up and say, if the student doesn't submit a score, they can't hold that against the child. However, if the student submits a score that is subpar, it's really low, they can't unsee that. In fact, one of our college counselors actually worked in UVA admissions, and she talks about that a lot, that, sometimes kids would submit scores that weren't very good and they weren't in line with UVA standards. And she did, it wasn't something that she could unsee. So we recommend that if kids are going to submit a score, that they only submit competitive scores. And in fact, we're going to do a webinar through the UVA Club next week just on testing, on the landscape of the test optional movement, what it looks like now, what it's going to look like in the future, the whole new digital SAT, and whether your child should take the SAT, ACT, or just skip the test completely. So look for that one next week. But the bottom line is that if kids are going to take the SAT or ACT, which we do recommend, we do think it's a good idea, because if they get a good score, they can use that score in their applications. And sometimes what we see is they may not use that score in their reach schools, but they might use that score strategically to help them as they apply to maybe their safety schools or their target schools. So if this is of interest to you and you have a junior or maybe a sophomore right now, and you want to see how they would do without taking the real test, we offer mock tests. They're $20. Kids can roll out of bed on a Saturday. They're virtual, but we have a live proctor, and they can see what their score will be like. And so you can just scan this QR code and it will take you to the page. Or you can go to our website, which is ectutoring.com/test-prep, and you can get information there. So this is the webinar I'm talking about for next week. It's all on testing, and that's on Thursday the 8th from 6 to 7. All right, so far we've talked about grades being the #1 factor. We've talked about crafting a narrative, and we've talked about the role of the SAT and ACT. So let's discuss now creating a list of schools. So what should be on your list of schools? Well, schools that you're considering should be right fit schools. And these are schools that they're not just the ones that are the hardest to get into for you, but they're the ones that feel the best to you, the ones that meet the criteria that the student has laid out. Usually I see that our kids apply to about 9 schools. I would say anywhere between, sometimes 6 and 12, but usually around there is a good amount. But within their list, they are strategic in knowing that they need schools that are in that safety category, which means you have a likely chance of getting in. The target category means it could go either way, but you like that school a lot And then the reach school are the ones that they're a stretch. You would love to go there, but they're definitely a stretch. So when we help kids think about schools, we think, again, we'll think about obvious things like size, the community, the culture inside the school, the majors that they're interested in, obviously the cost, whether they're applying in state versus out of state. That's a big thing. For example, at UVA, 2/3 of students accepted are in state, a third are out of state. And each state has a little bit different number system, so that some schools will accept more out of state, some schools or some states less, but it's a state regulation for that particular state. And then obviously the chance of acceptance. So what we're seeing, the trend that we've seen in the last 2 years from COVID, is that kids are coming to us with lists that are out of balance. They have way too many reach schools, and then they'll throw in a couple of safety schools, but the safety schools are not schools they even like. They'll say, well, I don't really want to go there. But when we work with kids, we want to make sure that every school on their list is a school that they absolutely love and they could see themselves at that school. Certainly, you're going to favor some more than others, but you want to make sure that you can really see yourself at that institution. And it should be a balance. The majority of schools are going to be in your target range, but you'll have a couple reaches and then a couple safeties. And sometimes kids will throw in a super reach school, like maybe one of those, but your list needs to be balanced. So that's how you create a college list. The other thing that you can do is think about your essays. And it used to be an essay was kind of a nice to have, but now an essay is imperative. Your essay has to knock it out of the park because colleges want to know what's unique about you. Like, why are you special? What is special about you in terms of coming to the school? What is your special gift or ability? And so thinking of a narrative that is unique to you without boasting or bragging is really important. I remember earlier this summer, I went to Boston College and I got the school magazine in the mail. And in the middle of the magazine was an interview with the dean of admissions. And it was all about like how hard it is to get into Boston College right now. And one of the questions was, what can make kids stand out? And the director of admissions said, well, definitely the essay. And he said, well, can you think of one that you really loved? And he went on to talk about this girl who submitted an essay. And the first line of the essay was, everybody stared and laughed at it. And so right away, the admissions director wanted to know, oh my gosh, what is she talking about? What did everybody stare and laugh at? So she goes on to write her essay about how when she was in third grade, she had to do a state project. And she went to a school where all the projects kids have to do ended up being parent projects. But her parents believed that she should be able to work independently and do things on her own. So she goes into school and her poster project has, Elmer's glue in different places, crinkled pictures. Things aren't perfect. She writes her letters instead of stenciling them. And it really looks like a kid project. So on the night that they're all displayed, everybody has their state poster proudly displayed. The parents are walking around and everybody laughs at it. And she goes on to write her essay about how she found independence, how she's become self-reliant, how she asks for help when she needs to, and how her parents turned her into the student she is. And he said that made a very much a lasting impression on me. We had a student write an essay on his nose and how his nose always defined him, the size of his nose. And at first we were like, that's kind of strange, but it worked for him. So it doesn't always have to be something that you're great at. It could be something that's unique only to you. So your essays are important. Although somebody can't say that an admissions person is going to love your topic, they can make sure it's technically correct. So we work with our students to make sure that they've hopefully chosen the right topic. We'll work on topic selection with them, but also you can help your kids with making sure that the basics, the technical aspects are correct. And consider also the supplemental essays. You know, we often think that Common App essay is the only one that you have to write, but that's not true at all. Many schools have lots of supplemental essays. So if you're applying to, say, 6 schools, you might end up doing maybe 15 essays. And although the other ones are shorter, it is still a lot of work. So starting early in the cycle, usually in the spring or the summer before your senior year, and trying to get all that stuff mostly out of the way if you can, so you can focus on your grades your senior year, is really important. All right, so what else is the application itself, making sure that you're keeping track of the deadlines, that you're gathering the recommendations that are needed by the school, and that you're understanding the strategy behind early action, early decision, and regular decision. And you probably have heard about these things, but basically there's 2 timeframes kids can apply to college. They can apply early action or early decision, which is usually November 1st or November 15th. So they have to get their applications in early, or they can apply regular decision, meaning that they give themselves more time. So they're going to get their applications in usually January 1st or January 15th. The difference is if you apply early, you get your letters of acceptance or waitlist or denials early, so you can make decisions. Now, within this early cycle, there's 2 ways. One is early decision, meaning you apply early, you get feedback early, but early action. But what is early decision? And that means if you're picking the one school you really have your heart on. Let's say it's UVA, because UVA just started an early decision program a few years ago, and I'll share with you the stats. So 3,500 students applied through early decision last year, and 1,109 were offered spots. So that's a really good metric to know, because if you're applying early decision, you have a better chance of getting in. And that's generally true throughout all colleges and universities that have an early decision program. Not all do. Now, the thing about early decision is if you apply early decision and you're accepted, you have to go there. It's a binding contract that you're saying, I will go to this school. And so sometimes that's really attractive to people. It's a sure thing. They feel like they're taken care of. Other times, kids aren't so sure. They like the school, but they're not in love with the school. So in that case, they're not sure. They have lots of loves. They might apply early action instead. All right, so what should your kids do this year? Well, it depends on what grade they're in. So for middle school students, it's really thinking ahead about the course trajectory. So usually, depending on where you live, kids are selecting their classes for next year, usually in February, sometimes into February or March. But think about when you get that information, sit down with your child and be strategic about it. What classes would be good for them to take? Should they take a challenging math class? Is that really their strength? And really in middle school, it's about developing good study habits. It's the basics, having a time to do homework, making sure kids have a clear desk and a space in which to do homework, that they're studying effectively for tests. And then as they get into high school in 9th and 10th grade, they're focused on grades. Their grades are really important, even in 9th grade. Obviously, their course selection, and then the extracurriculars and things they do over the summer. And this isn't something that we talked about much yet, but it's really important because this helps with your narrative. What are my extracurriculars? Well, it should be diving deep into something you love rather than doing 10 different things. So you've probably heard that, well, of course, when we were younger, we just signed up. I know I did. I signed up for a lot of clubs when I was decided that I wanted to apply to college, because I thought that would look good on my application. Gone are the days that you have to be good at everything. Enter the time frame where you can specialize. So if you have a passion, maybe you think about things that you could do around that. Maybe you love business. You could get a job. You could work in any kind of job. You could help out at a small business where you're not paid. So think about the things that you're going to do after school. And then even more importantly, are the things that you're going to do over the summer, which shouldn't include sitting and playing Xbox all summer, but it should hopefully include things that can help you to stand out, but things that you love doing, not that your parents signed you up for, but things that feel good to the student. So other things to consider are taking mock tests. So usually the spring of the sophomore year or the summer before the 11th grade year, that's when kids start thinking about testing the SAT or the ACT. Again, we'll talk about this in detail next week. But this is a good time for kids to sit for practice tests. All right, so what about 11th graders? What should they be doing? Of course, focus on grades because we know that's the #1 factor. Have a solid testing plan for the SAT or ACT. Continue on developing your theme or your narrative, and then plan ahead for summer. And also, the junior year is a time when you can start to craft and refine your college list, where you can sign up for information from the colleges. You can go to a college tour. You can go to a college fair. Make inroads by introducing yourself to the person from admissions at the college fair. They may be the person who reads your application. So all of those things matter your junior year. And then for seniors, really dedicating time to complete applications early on, as I mentioned, weaving the theme into essays, and then really paying close attention to deadlines. We work with lots of kids, and one of the biggest fears their parents have is that they're going to wait till the last minute to do everything. And it's super common. I'd say that kids really underestimate how long it's going to take them, and they overestimate how much time they have to dedicate to it. So anytime that kids can know the deadlines and really plan ahead is super helpful. And I've put together a downloadable checklist for what kids can be doing each year: freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors. And I'd probably categorize kids in middle school in the freshman group. And you can get that by texting the word college to 55444, and it will come straight to your inbox. So again, that's 55444 and the word college to get the college prep checklist for each grade. If this feels so overwhelming, I get it. We hear this all the time from parents, and we're happy to help you. Erin Ebert is our college counselor program director. She's been with the company for 12 years, and she's happy to help you. Even if it's just to put you on the right path. She's happy to have a call with you. Just scan this QR code, and she'll set up a time to talk to you about your child. And also remember, there's lots of ways that you can get help through the UVA program, sometimes through your counselor at school. So whatever it is, if you're feeling isolated or like this feels like a lot, always reach out. People are willing to help you. And then this is another one that we're having on January 18th. It's specific to standing out to highly selective colleges. And this is with our college counselor, Kristen. And she is our counselor who has worked with at UVA. So anyways, you can get more information by visiting our website at uctutoring.com. All right, so I would love to answer questions. I see that there's lots of things in the chat. So I will take a look to see what questions you have. And if you have one that you haven't put in the chat, please feel free to do so. Okay, so the question is, how do you define rigor? Rigor means, in another word, challenging or difficult. So rigor would be taking an advanced class. So for example, in 10th grade, you could take an honors class or you could take an AP class. A more rigorous schedule would be taking the AP class. You could take the required graduation requirement of 2 years of language, or you could take 3 years. That's more rigorous, but the most rigorous is 4 years. And a lot of very competitive colleges want to see 4 years of a language. So that would be an example of rigor as well. All right, so let's see. Oh, what is a competitive score on the SAT or the ACT? So it really depends on where the student wants to go. I'll take the ACT, for example. So a top score on the ACT is 36. It's the best score you can get. And so, and by the way, there's 4 sections on the ACT. There's the math, reading, science, and writing. And writing, for people that are interested, there's no more free write on either the SAT or the ACT. It's more about grammar, which for many kids that haven't had a ton of grammar, it is hard for them. So a competitive score on the ACT, like at UVA, I'm not sure what it is for this last year, but I would say it's probably about 31 to a 35, somewhere around there. So it's really hard to get a 34 or a 35. It's incredibly difficult. So that would be an example of a very, very competitive score, but usually over 30 is a competitive score. If you're applying to, say, Christopher Newport, a 30 is an amazing score, and it's really something that you would want to include in your application. So a good score depends on the school in which you want to attend. You can find this data on every college's website, even if they're test optional. If you go to the website, you'll see the incoming data for their freshman class, and you'll see the GPA, you'll see SAT scores, ACT scores, and it's all in there. What you'll also notice, though, is that test scores have, the bar has gotten even higher, partially because, most kids are strategic these days. They're only submitting good test scores. So the schools are reporting even higher test scores than before. So keep that in mind when you see some of those test scores on their website. All right, let's see what else. Do the colleges look at PSAT scores? And the answer is no. Sometimes parents call us and they want to schedule prep for the PSAT, but it's not necessary unless your child is in the running for a national merit scholarship, and that is extremely rare. Kids don't have to prep for the PSAT. The PSAT is like practice for students so that they can get a sense of what it's like to sit for a high stakes test for a long period of time and what it's like to take a test under pressure. But schools never get those scores. Nobody will see those scores when it comes to college. Nikki, I saw, and Melissa, I'll let Melissa respond to that because she's on here with me, and she will make sure that everybody gets in. All right, so let's see. Do you know about financial aid by early decision time? That is a question we have on the chat, and the answer is generally it depends on the school, but oftentimes you do not. So that's a consideration. So sometimes kids will apply to a school early decision and they won't know because decisions made on financial aid are usually after decisions come out, after early decisions. So they're not sure how much money will I get from the school. So for that reason, if it's going to put your family in financial hardship, from what I understand, you don't have to, that's a reason to renege on the contract. But in general, kids are not applying to schools. They're applying to schools knowing that they might go either way. So the question about financial aid and early decision is a real one. And for that reason, many times kids they won't apply early decision if that's a serious consideration to their family. What resources might you recommend to begin narrowing on an initial list of possible colleges other than US News and World Report? One of the, I'm not sure where you live, Erica, but most colleges subscribe to, or most high schools subscribe to a software called Naviance. And Naviance is basically a portal that houses data on colleges for schools. So let's say your student goes to James Madison High School in Vienna, Virginia. Madison High School has a portal, and your child will get a username and a password, and you can go into that and see where kids from that school, that high school, got in, what their GPA was like, and it provides all these scattergrams. So you can see which colleges are popular, what your child's chances are of getting in based on other students at the school. And so oftentimes that's a way to craft a list, looking at schools that other kids have attended. Also, the College Board, when you sign up for the SAT, the College Board produces the SAT and all the AP exams and also the PSAT. They have a feature that allows you to put in information like, I want to be in an urban area, I want to have a large school, I want this major, and it will give you a list of schools that might meet those criteria. But in general, kids that we work with, they have some idea of their list when they come to us, but they don't have everything down. They might have 3 or 4 schools, maybe 5 or 6 schools, and then we'll help them come up with other schools that could be a fit. So I would say reach out to your college counselor as well. They can help you too, and talking about schools that have been good fits for the other students at your high school. All right, is it better to have a worse grade in an honors or AP class or a good grade in a challenging class? It depends what the worst grade is. So if it's an A in a less challenging class or a B in an AP class, the answer is a B in an AP class. So that shows that you've taken a rigorous class and you've still done well. And, oftentimes kids don't submit. So even if you got a B, but maybe you got a 2 on the exam, don't submit that. You can be selective in how you're going to submit your AP scores at the end of the year. So I would say, always go for the rigor. If your child can take a rigorous schedule with still having a life, and that's important too. We don't want kids, doing 3 or 4 hours of homework where they don't have a life just to take these hard classes. There may not be the payoff. There has to be a balance where they're taking challenging classes in areas that they like, and they also have time for extracurriculars after school. What should be your strategy if your child really wants to go to UVA but gets waitlisted? We've had this happen with a lot of kids, and we'll encourage them to write to the person who read their application. And this is all for every school. It's online. So you can see your admissions person in your area. So I'll take the example of Madison High School. There's one person that reads all the Madison High School applications. There's one person that reads Yorktown High School, for example, and usually multiple schools in Arlington. So they're sorted by region. So I had this situation with my youngest child who he actually was accepted to all of the schools he applied to, but he was waitlisted to JMU, and that was surprising. But he had made over time a relationship with the director, with the admissions rep in our area, and he had met him at college fairs. They had exchanged emails. He always said, "Thank you so much for coming." He came to his school, all of those things. So when he got waitlisted, he emailed him. And he said, "I just want to let you know JMU is my #1 choice." And he did get off the wait list, and he emailed him and said, "I just want to let you know you're going to get off the wait list. I'm giving you a heads up." So I would say they can email the college person to let them know they're still interested. But the other things that are going to matter a lot are grades in their senior year. And often kids they're like, "Okay, I'm done my junior year. and they'll pick easy classes their senior year. I just had this conversation with a mom the other day. She's like, why does that matter? They're already applying to schools. I'm like, it matters a lot if you get waitlisted because they're going to want to see your grades. So you want to make sure you're still taking challenging classes, you're still getting really good grades, because those two things are factors for waitlisted kids. Are some majors harder to get into schools like UVA than other majors? And the answer is yes. You know, some schools kids apply to, they don't apply to a major. They decide on a major once they get there. So yes, certainly some colleges within the college are harder to get into, and some aren't. I'm not sure exactly about which majors at UVA are harder to get into. I would defer to one of our college counselors who handles that more than I do. But I can say in general, when we look at kids that are applying to the schools themselves within the school, that there are some that are harder. If a child has A's and B's and an occasional C each semester, but their SAT scores are really high, will the grades hurt them? These are a sprinkle of honor and AP classes, nothing too rigorous. If the grades improve each year, does that tell the story that they will forgive early C's? It depends on where you want to go. So if you're applying to a really, really competitive school, I think it will be an issue because there are also kids applying that don't have any C's, and they may be looked at more favorably. But if the school is a target school, that may be perfectly fine because the admissions folks see the trajectory. They see that kid that he's getting better. And oftentimes kids will write their essays on things like that. You know, this is what I learned when I was a freshman, this happened to me. And then I realized, you know, whatever the story is, that I needed to do blah, blah, blah. And now I do this thing. And so they're telling the story of what impacted them the most in their life, the change that happened, and where they are now. So I would say if there are spatterings of things that aren't too favorable, anytime you can talk about that and explain it, it's super helpful. So that can even be in a supplemental essay too. But I would say, again, for a super competitive school, it might be an issue, but maybe not so much in a school that's a little bit less competitive. All right, so I think those are all the questions that we have. Oh, there's one more. Let's see. If a child may want to play a sport in college, does that change the deadlines? I hear about some athletes committing in the fall of their senior year, and I believe it does. We have one college counselor on staff. Her name's Lisa, and she works a lot with athletes, kids that are going to play a sport in high school. She knows more than I do. So I can get back to you if you want to email me. I will ask her and send you the answer. My email, and all of you, if I didn't answer a question, please email me, Ann, A-N-N, @ectutoring.com. But I do know that deadlines are different for colleges when it comes to recruited athletes. And we see that kids will start early. Some colleges with recruited athletes want test scores. It's a requirement. Sometimes they'll take a PSAT score, but I would talk to that college specifically and ask what their time frame is for deadlines. All right, I think that is it, everyone. It was such a pleasure to speak to all of you. I hope that you found this to be helpful. Again, if you would like to talk about your child, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to help you. And again, if you wanted that checklist for what to do at each grade, you can get that by texting 55444 and the word college, and it will come to your inbox. Thank you so much, everyone from the UVA Club. It was great to meet you. I hope you have an excellent evening. Bye-bye.